The stars looked the same as they always had when Captain Marcus Webb stared out from the bridge of the ESV Prometheus. Cold, distant, and filled with promise. He never thought this routine survey mission would be his last time seeing them as a normal human being. "Captain, we're approaching the target coordinates," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from her navigation station. Her voice carried the excitement that always came with reaching a new star system. After 3 years of deep space travel, the crew still felt that thrill when they found something new. Webb nodded and walked to the center of the bridge. Around him, his officers worked at their stations with the quiet efficiency that came from years of training and months of working together in the black void between stars. The Prometheus was Earth's most advanced ship, built for long-range exploration beyond the known boundaries of human space. "What do our sensors show?" Webb asked. "The system has 7 planets, Captain," Kim replied, studying her displays. 3 are in the habitable zone. No immediate signs of intelligent life, but we're detecting some unusual energy readings from the 4th planet. Webb felt a familiar tingle of curiosity. That was why they were out here, after all. Earth had joined the Galactic Confederation only 50 years ago, making humanity one of the newest members of the vast alliance of alien civilizations. Most of the galaxy had been mapped and claimed by older races like the Zephyrians with their mastery of energy, or the Korthax who could reshape living matter like clay. Humans were still the newcomers, still proving themselves worthy of a place among the stars. The Confederation had given Earth a small territory on the galactic rim to explore and develop. It wasn't much compared to the vast empires of the elder races, but it was home. "Take us in for a closer look," Webb ordered. "And notify the science teams. Tell Dr. Martinez we might have something interesting for her." The Prometheus moved deeper into the system, its engines humming with barely contained power. Webb watched the main screen as the 4th planet grew larger. It was a barren world, all red rock and deep canyons. But their sensors were picking up energy signatures that didn't match anything in their databases. Dr. Elena Martinez arrived on the bridge 15 minutes later, her dark hair tied back and her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. She had been studying xenorchaeology for most of her adult life, hoping to find traces of the ancient civilizations that once filled the galaxy before the current powers rose to dominance. "What do we have, Captain?" she asked, moving to the science station. "Unknown energy patterns from the surface," Webb replied. "Could be natural phenomena, but the readings are unlike anything we've seen before." Martinez studied the data scrolling across her screen. Her frown deepened with each passing second. "Captain, these readings, they're not matching any known energy types. The patterns are too regular to be natural, but they don't fit any technology in our databases either." Webb felt that familiar mix of excitement and caution that came with real discovery. Could it be from one of the elder races? Something they left behind? "Possibly," Martinez said, but she didn't sound convinced. "I'd need to get closer to be sure. Maybe send down a survey team." Before Webb could respond, the ship shuddered slightly. It was barely noticeable, just a small vibration that ran through the hull. But on a ship like the Prometheus, built to handle the stresses of deep space travel, any unexpected movement was cause for concern. "Engineering report," Webb called out. "We're showing some unusual readings down here, Captain," came the voice of Chief Engineer Thompson over the comm. "Nothing dangerous, but our quantum field generators are acting strange, like they're responding to something external." Webb and Martinez exchanged glances. The quantum field generators were what allowed the Prometheus to travel faster than light. They created a bubble of altered space-time around the ship, letting it slip between the normal dimensions where the speed of light was just a suggestion rather than a law. Could the energy source on the planet be affecting our systems? Webb asked. "It's possible," Martinez replied. "Some of the ancient races had technology that could manipulate space-time directly. If this is a remnant of their civilization... She didn't finish the sentence, but Webb understood. The ancient races were gone now, their empires fallen to time and war. but their technology was still scattered across the galaxy, and most of it was far beyond anything the current civilizations could understand or safely use. "Take us to a safe distance," Webb ordered. "We'll observe from orbit," and the ship shuddered again, more violently this time. The lights on the bridge flickered and several warning alarms began to sound. Webb grabbed the arm of his command chair as the deck tilted beneath his feet. "Captain?" Lieutenant Kim called out, her voice tight with panic. "Something's wrong with our navigation systems. The quantum field is fluctuating wildly." Webb looked at the main screen and felt his blood turn to ice. The stars were moving. Not the slow, steady movement of a ship changing course, but a violent twisting motion that made his eyes hurt to watch. The familiar constellations were stretching and bending like reflections in disturbed water. "All stop," he shouted. "Shut down the quantum generators." "I'm trying, Captain," Thompson's voice came through the com, strained with effort. "But they're not responding to commands. It's like something else is controlling them." The ship shook again, harder this time. Through the bridge windows, Webb could see space itself seeming to ripple and fold around them. The planet below was becoming distorted, its surface stretching into impossible shapes. Dr. Martinez was working frantically at her station, her fingers flying over the controls. "Captain, the energy source on the planet. It's not technology, it's some kind of dimensional anomaly." "A weak point in space-time itself?" Webb felt a chill run down his spine. Dimensional anomalies were theoretical constructs that most scientists believed were impossible. They were supposed to be tears in the fabric of reality itself, places where the normal laws of physics broke down. "If one actually existed... Duck, can we break free?" he asked. "I don't think so," Martinez replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're being pulled into it. Whatever this thing is, it's drawing us in." The ship groaned around them as forces beyond human understanding took hold of the Prometheus. Webb watched helplessly as the stars outside continued their impossible dance, stretching into long streamers of light that hurt to look at directly. He thought about the 847 people aboard his ship. Scientists, engineers, support staff, and their families. People who had volunteered for a 5-year mission to explore the unknown reaches of space. They had signed up for adventure and discovery, not for whatever was happening to them now. "Send." "A distress signal," Webb ordered. "Full power, all frequencies." "Already trying, Captain," came the reply from the communications officer. "But I don't think anyone will receive it. Space around us is too distorted." Webb gripped his command chair tighter as the ship was pulled deeper into the anomaly. The hull was making sounds he had never heard before, metal groaning under stresses it was never designed to handle. But somehow the ship was holding together, through the chaos. He heard Dr. Martinez speaking quietly to herself, reading off numbers from her instruments. "The dimensional barriers are collapsing around us. We're falling through layers of reality." Webb didn't understand what that meant, but the tone of her voice told him everything he needed to know. They were going somewhere that no human ship had ever gone before. Somewhere that might not even exist in the same universe they called home. The last thing he saw before the walls of reality closed around them was Earth's sun, visible as a tiny point of light millions of miles away. Then even that was gone, swallowed by the twisted space-time that was dragging the Prometheus into the unknown. The ship fell through dimensions that had no names, carrying its human cargo toward a realm where the very concept of existence would be redefined. Behind them, in normal space, the dimensional anomaly collapsed and disappeared, leaving no trace that the ESV Prometheus had ever been there at all. For 3 years, Earth search fleets scoured the sector where the Prometheus had vanished. They found nothing. No debris, no energy signatures, no clues about what had happened to one of humanity's most advanced ships and the 847 souls aboard. Eventually, the search was called off. The ESV Prometheus was officially listed as lost with all hands, another casualty of humanity's bold push into the dangerous unknown of deep space. Memorial services were held, families grieved, life went on. In the years that followed, humanity continued its careful expansion into the galaxy. Earth's colonies grew slowly but steadily, always mindful of their place as junior members of the Galactic Confederation. The major powers tolerated human expansion as long as it didn't interfere with their own interests. The Zephyrians controlled vast energy networks that spanned multiple star systems. The Korthax had perfected biological technology that let them reshape living matter at the molecular level. The ancient Veil manipulated quantum forces that most races couldn't even detect, let alone understand. Compared to such powers, humanity's achievements seemed small. They had achieved faster-than-light travel independently, which earned them some respect, but their technology was still primitive by galactic standards. Earth provided raw materials and served as a curiosity for the older races who found human adaptability interesting but not particularly threatening. Nobody expected the missing exploration ship to return. Nobody was prepared for what it would become during its 15-year journey through impossible realms. And nobody could have predicted that humanity's lost children would come home as something far more dangerous than anyone in the galaxy could imagine. The ESV Prometheus was gone, lost in the space between realities. But something else was coming back, wearing its name and carrying its crew. Something that had learned secrets the galaxy was not ready to face. Admiral Sarah Chun was reviewing supply reports in her office aboard the Earth Defense Station when the emergency alarms began to sound. She had been humanity's representative to the Galactic Defense Council for 8 years now, and in all that time, she had never heard the station's priority alert. System activate. The sound cut through the normal hum of activity like a knife. Red lights flashed in the corridors outside her office as crew members rushed to their emergency stations. Chun dropped her datapad and headed straight for the command center, her mind already running through possible threats. "Report," she called. Out as she entered the bustling command room, Commander Jackson looked up from his station, his face pale with confusion. "Admiral, we're detecting a massive spatial distortion at the edge of the Sol system. Something big just appeared out of nowhere." Chun moved to the main display screen where tactical information was streaming in from monitoring stations throughout the system. What she saw made no sense at all. There was a tear in space itself, roughly circular and several kilometers across. The edges of the tear rippled like water, and strange energies poured out of it in patterns that made their sensors malfunction. "How is that possible?" Chun asked. "Space doesn't just tear open." "Unknown, Admiral," Jackson replied. "But something's coming through." As they watched, a shape began to emerge from the impossible rift. At first it was just a dark outline against the swirling energies, but as it moved closer to normal space, Chun could see that it was a ship. A human ship, though something about its design looked wrong. "Can you identify the vessel?" she asked. Jackson worked at his console for several seconds before looking up with an expression of disbelief. "Admiral, the computer is saying it's the ESV Prometheus." "But that's impossible. The Prometheus was lost 15 years ago." Shun felt her heart skip a beat. She remembered the Prometheus well. It had been Earth's pride, the most advanced exploration vessel ever built. When it disappeared during a routine survey mission, the loss had been devastating both militarily and emotionally. The ship had carried nearly 1,000 people, including families of the crew members. "Are you certain?" she asked. "The hull configuration matches," Jackson said, but his voice was uncertain. "But Admiral, the ship looks different. The sensors are having trouble getting clear readings. But the hull seems to be covered in materials we don't recognize. And the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases." Chun studied the main screen as the ship that claimed to be the Prometheus moved steadily toward the inner system. It was definitely human in design, with the distinctive elongated hull and rotating habitat sections that marked Earth's deep space vessels. But Jackson was right. Something was very wrong with it. The hull showed signs of damage and repair, but the materials used in the repairs didn't look like anything human technology could produce. Strange geometric patterns covered sections of the ship, designs that seemed to shift and change when she looked at them directly. And most disturbing of all, the ship was moving without any visible propulsion system. "Admiral," came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving reports from monitoring stations throughout the system. The ship's presence is causing widespread electronic interference. Several stations have reported complete sensor failures." Chun frowned. The Galactic Confederation maintained monitoring stations throughout the Sol system as part of their standard security protocols. These stations use technology far more advanced than anything Earth possessed. If they were experiencing failures, whatever was aboard that ship was beyond current understanding. "Have we tried to make contact?" she asked. "Yes, Admiral, but there's been no response," the communications officer replied. "All frequencies are either being blocked or the ship simply isn't receiving our signals." Chun watched the ship continue its approach. It was moving at a steady pace that would bring it to Earth in approximately 6 hours. The trajectory was perfect, as if the ship knew exactly where it was going despite having no apparent navigation systems active. "Get me a direct line to Galactic Defense Command," she ordered. "They need to know about this immediately." Within minutes, Chun was speaking with Admiral Vexhai, a Zephyrian who served as the current head of the Galactic Defense Council. The Zephyrian's energy-based form flickered on the communication screen, its patterns of light shifting with what Chun had learned to recognize as concern. "Admiral Chun," Vexhai's translated voice came through the speakers. "We are already aware of the situation. Our long-range sensors detected the spatial anomaly when it appeared. What can you tell us about this vessel?" "It appears to be one of our lost exploration ships," Chun replied carefully. "The ESV Prometheus, missing for 15 years. But something is clearly wrong with it." The patterns of light that made up Vexhai's form pulsed rapidly, indicating deep thought. "A human vessel returning after 15 years with unknown modifications. This is most concerning. We are dispatching a task force to investigate." Chun felt a moment of alarm. Galactic Defense Task Forces were not sent to investigate. They were sent to neutralize threats. "Admiral, with respect, this is still a human vessel. We should be allowed to make first contact." "Negative," Vexhai replied. "The energy signatures from this ship are unlike anything we have encountered. Until we understand what we are dealing with, it must be treated as a potential threat to galactic security." The communication ended, leaving Chun staring at a blank screen. She understood Vexhai's position, but the thought of alien warships moving to intercept a human vessel made her deeply uncomfortable, especially one that might contain survivors from the Prometheus. "Commander Jackson," she said, turning back to her tactical officer, "how long until the Confederation Task Force arrives?" "Based on their usual response times, approximately 4 hours, Admiral," Jackson replied. "The Prometheus will reach Earth orbit about 2 hours after that," Chun nodded grimly. She had 4 hours to figure out what was happening before the most powerful military forces in the galaxy descended on her home system. 4 hours to make contact with a ship that had been missing for 15 years and now defied every law of physics she knew. "Keep trying to establish communication," she ordered, "and get me everything we have on the Prometheus mission. I want to know exactly what they were doing when they disappeared." As her staff rushed to carry out her orders, Chun continued to stare at the main screen. The ship that might be the Prometheus continued its steady approach, still showing no signs of active propulsion but moving with purpose toward Earth. 2 hours later, her communication attempts finally received a response. "This is Captain Marcus Webb of the ESV Prometheus, requesting immediate conference with Earth Defense Command and Galactic Council representatives." Chun felt a chill run down her spine. She had known Marcus Webb personally before his disappearance. They had served together early in their careers, and she remembered his voice clearly. But the voice coming through the speakers was different somehow. It had the same tone and inflection, but there was something underneath it that didn't sound quite human. "Captain Webb," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun, Earth Defense Command. We show you as missing for 15 years. What is your status?" There was a long pause before Webb responded. Time flows differently where we have been, Admiral. We have much to discuss, but not over open channels. We are aware of the approaching Confederation task force. This is acceptable. Chun exchanged glances with her staff. How could the Prometheus know about the task force? Their sensors should not have been able to detect ships still hours away, especially ships using Galactic Confederation stealth technology. Captain, we need to verify your identity and the status of your crew, Chun said. Can you provide current personnel counts and mission status? All 847 souls aboard the Prometheus remain alive and functional, Webb replied. The word functional struck Chun as an odd choice. However, we have undergone significant changes during our time away. We request immediate audience with appropriate authorities to discuss matters of galactic security. Galactic security? Chun asked. Captain, what exactly happened to you out there? Another long pause. When Webb spoke again, his voice carried what sounded like infinite sadness. We learned things, Admiral. Things about the nature of reality that will change everything. We did not choose to become what we are now, but the choice was made for us by necessity. Before Chun could ask what he meant, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. Her tactical displays lit up with new contacts as the Confederation task force dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Admiral, Commander Jackson called out, his voice tight with tension. The task force consists of 12 heavy cruisers and 4 dreadnoughts. They're moving to intercept the Prometheus. Chen watched as the most powerful warships in the galaxy took up positions around the approaching human vessel. Each of those ships carried enough firepower to level a planet, and their commanders would not hesitate to use it if they perceived a threat. Captain Webb, she said into her communicator, you need to understand that you're now surrounded by Confederation warships. Any hostile action will result in your immediate destruction. We understand, Admiral, Webb replied, and there was something in his voice that might have been amusement. We harbor no hostile intent toward the Confederation forces. However, they may wish to maintain a safe distance from our vessel. What do you mean by safe distance? Chun asked. Her answer came not from Webb, but from her own sensor operators. Admiral, one of them called out, panic evident in his voice. The Confederation ships are reporting massive system failures. Electronics are shutting down across their entire fleet. Chun looked at her displays in horror as one by one, the most advanced warships in the galaxy went dark. Their engines shut down, their weapons powered down, and their communication systems went silent. Within minutes, 16 of the most powerful vessels ever built were drifting helplessly in space. Captain Webb, Chun said, her voice barely above a whisper. What have you done? Nothing intentionally, Admiral, Webb replied. Our presence has unfortunate effects on technology not designed to handle certain types of energy. This is why. We must speak with your leaders immediately. There are things coming that make our little demonstration here seem trivial by comparison. Chun stared at the main screen where the Prometheus continued its approach to Earth, the ship that had left human space 15 years ago, as an exploration vessel had returned as something that could disable an entire Confederation battle fleet, simply by existing near them. Whatever had happened to the crew of the Prometheus during their time in the unknown, they were no longer entirely human. And if Webb was telling the truth about things coming that were worse than what they had become, then the entire galaxy was in more danger than anyone realized. The Prometheus was coming home. But the question that terrified Chun was whether home would survive their return. The ESV Prometheus took position in high Earth orbit exactly where Captain Webb said it would, ignoring the disabled Confederation fleet drifting helplessly around it. Admiral Chun watched from the Earth Defense Station as the ship that should have been familiar looked increasingly alien with each passing hour. The hull modifications were more extensive than their long-range sensors had indicated. Sections of the ship seemed to phase in and out of visibility as if they existed only partially in normal space. Strange geometric patterns covered the entire vessel, designs that hurt to look at directly and seemed to move when observed from different angles. Admiral, Commander Jackson reported, his voice strained. We're receiving multiple reports of electronic malfunctions throughout the system. Everything from personal communicators to industrial computers. The closer they are to the Prometheus, the worse the failures become. Chun nodded grimly. The ship's presence was affecting technology across half the solar system. Even their own station, positioned much farther away, was experiencing intermittent system failures. Whatever energy the Prometheus was putting out, it was fundamentally incompatible with normal electronics. Have the Confederation ships regained any functionality? She asked. Negative, Admiral. They're completely dead in space. Their crews are alive, but they're having to use backup life support systems that were designed to work without computer assistance. Chun looked out through the observation windows toward Earth below. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, its blue and white surface unmarked by the crisis unfolding in orbit. But she knew that down on the surface, billions of people were beginning to experience the same electronic failures that had crippled the alien warships. Admiral Chun, came Captain Webb's voice over the communication system. We are ready to receive your delegation. However, we recommend that your representatives bring no electronic devices. They will not function aboard our vessel. Chun had been dreading this moment. Meeting face-to-face with whatever the crew of the Prometheus had become was necessary. But the thought of boarding that ship filled her with unease. Still, as Earth's senior representative, the responsibility was hers. Captain Webb, I'll come aboard personally with a small diplomatic team, she replied. But I need to know what precautions we should take. No special preparations are required, Admiral, Webb said. And once again there was that strange quality to his voice that didn't sound entirely human. We remain who we were, though we have become more than we were. You will understand when you see us. 2 hours later, Chun found herself aboard a small shuttlecraft approaching the Prometheus. The shuttle was one of the older models that relied more on mechanical systems than computerized ones, but even it was showing signs of malfunction as they drew closer to the mysterious ship. With her were Dr. Elizabeth Foster, Earth's leading xenobiologist, and Commander David Torres, a military specialist in first contact procedures. All three wore simple environmental suits without any electronic components. Admiral, Torres said as they approached the Prometheus. Docking bay. I've never seen anything like this ship's energy signature. Our instruments can't even classify what type of power source it's using. Chun could see what he meant. Through the shuttle's small windows, the Prometheus looked more like a living thing than a starship. The hull seemed to pulse with internal light, and the geometric patterns covering its surface shifted and flowed like living tissue. And just remember, she told her team, these are still human beings. Whatever has happened to them, they were once our people. The docking bay of the Prometheus opened to receive them, but instead of the mechanical doors Chun expected, the opening seemed to simply appear in the hull like a mouth opening in living flesh. The shuttle settled onto a landing platform that looked normal enough, though the metal had a strange rainbow sheen that hadn't been there 15 years ago. As they disembarked, Chun immediately noticed that the air inside the ship felt different. It was breathable, but it seemed to carry a faint electrical charge that made the hair on her arms stand up. The gravity was normal, but her inner ear kept insisting that up and down weren't quite where they should be. Welcome aboard the Prometheus. Admiral, Chun turned toward the voice and had to struggle not to step backward in shock. The man approaching them was definitely Marcus Webb, but he had changed in ways that went beyond simple aging. He looked exactly as he had 15 years ago, not a day older, but his eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. When he moved, it was with a fluid grace that didn't look entirely natural. Behind him came other members of the crew, and Sheen felt her breath catch in her throat. Like Webb, they showed no signs of aging, but each of them had been changed in subtle ways. Some seemed to shimmer slightly, as if they weren't entirely solid. Others moved in ways that defied normal human coordination, taking steps that should have been impossible given the laws of physics. Captain Webb, Chun said, forcing herself to maintain military bearing despite her shock. It's good to see you alive. All of you. Webb smiled, and for a moment he looked like the man she had known years ago. It's good to see you too, Sarah. though I suspect you'll find our reunion less pleasant than you might have hoped." He gestured for them to follow him deeper into the ship. As they walked, Chun noticed that the corridors of the Prometheus had been extensively modified. The walls were covered with the same geometric patterns they had seen on the hull, designs that seemed to move and shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. "What happened to you out there, Marcus?" she asked quietly. Webb was silent for a long moment as he led them through corridors that seemed to stretch farther than should have been possible given the ship's size. "We fell through a crack in reality, Sarah, into a place where the rules that govern our universe don't apply." They entered what had once been the ship's main conference room, though it too had been changed. The table was still there, but it seemed to be made of a material that was simultaneously metal and crystal and something else entirely. The chairs appeared normal until Chun sat in one and realized it was adjusting itself to her body in ways that felt almost alive. "You said you fell through a crack," Dr. Foster spoke up, her scientific curiosity overcoming her obvious nervousness. "What do you mean?" Webb sat across from them, and when he did, Chun could have sworn she saw other versions of him sitting in the same chair, ghostly images that overlapped with his real form. "The dimensional anomaly we encountered wasn't natural," he explained. "It was a wound in space-time itself, created by beings that exist outside our normal reality." "Outside our reality?" Commander Torres asked. "That's impossible." Webb's smile was sad and knowing. "We used to think so too. But the universe is far larger and more complex than any of us imagined. Our galaxy, our entire dimension, is just one bubble in an infinite foam of realities. And in the spaces between those bubbles, there are things that make our most advanced civilizations look like children playing with toys." Shun felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying you met these beings?" "We call them the architects," Webb replied. "They exist partially outside of normal space-time, which allows them to manipulate reality in ways that seem impossible to us. When we fell through the dimensional crack, we landed in their realm." Dr. Foster leaned forward, her eyes bright with scientific fascination despite her obvious fear. "What did they do to you?" Webb was quiet for a moment, and Shin could see pain in his ancient young eyes. "They saved us. Our ship was falling apart, our crew was dying. The dimensional transition had damaged us in ways that normal physics couldn't heal, so they changed us." "Changed how?" Chun asked. Webb stood up and walked to the far wall of the conference room. As he approached it, the wall became transparent, showing them a view of Earth below. But Shin could see that the image wasn't coming through a window. The wall itself had become a display, responding to Webb's thoughts. "They gave us the ability to exist partially outside normal space-time," Webb explained. "We can manipulate matter and energy directly without tools or machines. We can see across dimensions, perceive realities that exist alongside our own." "But the price was our humanity?" Chen watched in fascination and horror as Webb placed his hand against the transparent wall, and the entire section began to reshape itself, flowing like liquid metal before solidifying into new patterns. "We're still human in our minds and hearts," Webb continued. "But our bodies, our very existence, has been fundamentally altered. We can no longer age or die in any conventional sense. We exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And our presence disrupts technology because we operate on principles that your machines can't understand." "Why did they do this to you?" Torres asked. Webb turned back to them, and this time Chen could clearly see the multiple overlapping images of him, as if she were looking at several different versions of the same person existing in the same space. "Because something is coming," Webb said. "Simply something that the architects fear, which should terrify everyone in this galaxy. They call them the Devourers." Dr. Foster frowned. "Devourers of what?" "Reality itself," Webb replied. "They exist in the void between dimensions, consuming entire universes and leaving nothing behind. They move from reality to reality like a plague, destroying everything that exists." June felt her mouth go dry. "And they're coming here?" The dimensional crack that we fell through wasn't an accident, Webb explained. It was a probe sent by the Devourers to test the stability of our reality. They found us, Sarah, and they're coming. The room fell silent as the implications of Webb's words sank in. Chun thought about the Galactic Confederation, with all its mighty civilizations and advanced technologies. The Zephyrians with their energy manipulation, the Korthax with their biological mastery, the Ancient Veil with their quantum technology, all of it meaningless against beings that could consume reality itself. "How long do we have?" she asked quietly. "The architects don't measure time the way we do," Webb replied. "But in terms you would understand, perhaps a few years, maybe less." "And you're supposed to stop them?" Torres asked. Webb's laugh was bitter and hollow. "We're supposed to try. The architects changed us into something that can fight concepts with concepts, reality with unreality. We're humanity's first line of defense against the impossible." Dr. Foster was studying Webb intently, her scientific mind clearly struggling to process what she was hearing. "The electronic interference, the way you can manipulate matter? These are side effects of your transformation?" "Partly," Webb nodded. "We exist in multiple dimensions now, which means we interact with your technology in ways it wasn't designed to handle, but it's also a sign of what's coming. When the Devourers arrive, they'll disrupt reality on a much larger scale." June stood up slowly, her mind reeling from everything she had learned. "Marcus, you said all 847 of your crew survived. Where are they now?" "Spread throughout the ship, learning to control their new abilities," Webb replied. "Some are having an easier time adapting than others. The children seem to adjust fastest, which the architect said was expected." "The children," Chun repeated, thinking about the families that had been aboard the Prometheus. "They're still children in spirit," Webb said, "but they've been changed just like the rest of us. In some ways, they're better adapted to our new existence than the adults. They don't fight against what they've become." Chun looked around the impossible conference room, at the walls that responded to thought and the furniture that seemed alive. She thought about the disabled Confederation fleet floating helplessly outside, victims of technology that operated on principles beyond their understanding. "What do you need from us?" she asked finally. Webb's expression grew serious. "Time, primarily. We need to prepare Earth and the Confederation for what's coming. The Devourers can't be fought with conventional weapons or traditional tactics. We'll need every advantage we can get. And the Confederation races will need to accept that humanity has changed," Chun said, understanding the political implications. "More than that," Webb replied. "They'll need to accept that we've become something beyond their ability to control or understand. Some races will see us as a threat that needs to be eliminated. Others will try to use us for their own purposes." Chun nodded grimly. She could already imagine the chaos that would erupt when the news of the Prometheus's return spread throughout the galaxy. Panic, political maneuvering, and probably attempts to capture or destroy the ship and its crew. "We'll help however we can," she promised. "But Marcus, I have to ask, are you still human enough to care about saving humanity?" Webb looked at her with those ancient eyes that had seen things beyond normal reality, and for a moment his smile was purely human. "Sarah, we may have become something else, but we're still human where it matters most. We still remember what it means to love, to hope, to fight for something bigger than ourselves. That's why we came home." Outside the ship, Earth continued its ancient rotation, unaware that its lost children had returned as something beyond human understanding, carrying news of a threat that could end everything that had ever existed. The real test was just beginning. 3 days after Admiral Chun's meeting with Captain Webb, emergency sessions were being held in government buildings across the galaxy. The news of the Prometheus's return had spread quickly through Confederation channels, causing panic and confusion among the major powers dotted in the great crystal halls of the Zephyrian Empire. Energy beings flickered with patterns that showed deep distress. The Zephyrians had built their civilization on the mastery of electromagnetic forces, but the human ship's mere presence had shut down their most advanced technologies. If humans could do this accidentally, what did it mean for Zephyrian dominance? On the bio-worlds of the Korthax Collective, living computers that served as their government councils were struggling to process the implications. Their entire society was based on the manipulation of biological systems. But the reports from the Prometheus suggested technology that went far beyond anything they understood. Even the ancient Veil, masters of quantum manipulation who rarely concerned themselves with younger races, were calling emergency gatherings in dimensions that other species couldn't even perceive. Admiral Chun stood in the main conference room of Earth's government center, watching the chaos unfold on communication screens from around the galaxy. President Morrison sat at the head of the table, her face pale with the weight of decisions that could determine humanity's future. Admiral, President Morrison said, give me your assessment. Are we looking at a threat or an opportunity? Chun chose her words carefully. Both, Madam President. Captain Webb and his crew represent capabilities beyond anything in our current understanding. But they're still human, and they're warning us about a threat that makes their abilities seem small by comparison. The Devourers, Morrison said, pronouncing the word like a curse. Do you believe Webb's claims about these beings? Before Chun could answer, one of the communication screens lit up with an incoming priority message from the Galactic Defense Council. Admiral Vexhi's energy. Form appeared, its patterns more agitated than Chun had ever seen. President Morrison, Vexhi said without preamble, the Confederation Council has reached a decision regarding the human vessel in your system. It must be destroyed before its technology can spread to other species. Chun felt her blood turn to ice. Admiral Vexhi, that ship contains nearly 1,000 human citizens. They're not hostile. Their intentions are irrelevant, Vexhi replied. The technology they possess represents a fundamental threat to galactic stability. Our finest ships were disabled by their mere presence. If other species gained access to such capabilities, it would destroy the balance of power that has maintained peace for centuries. President Morrison leaned forward, her voice deadly calm. Admiral, are you declaring war on Earth? Vexhi's energy patterns flickered with what might have been uncertainty. We prefer a diplomatic solution. Surrender the vessel and its crew for study, and Earth will be granted significant territorial concessions in return. Study, Chun repeated, her voice filled with disgust. You mean dissection? The technology must be understood and controlled. Vexhi said, this is not negotiable. The communication ended abruptly, leaving the room in tense silence. Chun could see the fear in President Morrison's eyes, and she understood it completely. Earth's entire military couldn't stand against a single Confederation dreadnought, and now they were facing the combined might of multiple galactic civilizations. Options? Morrison asked quietly. Limited, Chun replied. We could try to evacuate the Prometheus crew, but I doubt they'd leave their ship. And even if they did, where could we hide nearly 1,000 people with abilities that disrupt technology? Their discussion was interrupted by a new voice coming through the communication system. It was Captain Webb speaking directly from the Prometheus. President Morrison, I apologize for interrupting, but we need to speak immediately. Events are moving faster than we anticipated. Morrison looked at Chun, who nodded. Captain Webb, this is President Morrison. We're listening. Madam President, we're aware of the Confederation's ultimatum. We also know that 3 separate fleets are currently moving toward the Sol system with orders to destroy us if we don't surrender. Chun felt a chill. Their own intelligence hadn't detected any fleet movements yet. How could the Prometheus know about military actions before Earth's own monitoring systems? Captain, Morrison said, if you know about the fleets, then you must understand our position. Earth cannot fight the entire Confederation. Earth won't have to, Webb replied. But we need to show you something first. Something that will change how you view this crisis. The air in the conference room began to shimmer, and suddenly Captain Webb was standing in the room with them. Not as a hologram or projection, but physically present, as if he had simply stepped through the walls. President. Morrison and her staff jumped back in alarm, but Webb raised his hands peacefully. I'm sorry for the dramatic entrance, but time is short, may I? He gestured toward the large display screen at the front of the room. Without waiting for permission, he approached it and placed his hand against the surface. The screen flickered and changed, showing an image that made Chen's breath catch in her throat. It was space, but not space as they knew it. Instead of the familiar backdrop of stars and galaxies, she was looking at something that resembled a vast foam with countless bubble-like structures floating in an endless void. Each bubble contained swirling lights and patterns that hurt to look at directly. This is reality, Webb explained. Not just our universe, but all of existence. Each bubble represents a complete dimensional layer containing billions of galaxies and trillions of civilizations. The image zoomed in on one particular bubble, as Shen could see that it contained familiar structures. The Milky Way galaxy, the Andromeda galaxy, and all the other stellar formations she knew. This is our dimensional layer, Webb continued. Everything the Confederation knows, everything they've explored, all exists within this single bubble. President Morrison stared at the display in fascination and horror. How many bubbles are there? Infinite, Webb replied simply. And in the space between them, in the void that separates one reality from another, live the Devourers. The image changed again, showing dark shapes moving through the emptiness between dimensional bubbles. They were difficult to focus on, seeming to shift and change form constantly, but their purpose was clear. As Chun watched, one of the shapes approached a bubble of reality and began to feed on it. The bubble dimmed and shrunk as the creature consumed it, billions of galaxies and countless civilizations simply ceasing to exist. Within minutes, an entire dimensional layer was gone, leaving nothing but empty void where an infinity of worlds had once been. They consume reality itself, Webb explained. Not just matter and energy, but the very concept of existence. Everything that was, is, or could be in that dimension simply stops being. Shun felt sick. How many dimensions have they destroyed? Thousands, millions. The architects have been fighting them for eons, but they can only slow the Devourers down, not stop them. That's why they changed us. The display shifted again, showing the dimensional crack that had swallowed the Prometheus 15 years ago. But now Chen could see it from the architect's perspective, as a controlled breach designed to pull the human ship into their realm. The crack wasn't random, Webb continued. The architects had been studying our galaxy for some time, looking for a species that might be able to adapt to the changes necessary to fight the Devourers. They chose humanity. Why us? Morrison asked. There are species in the galaxy with far more advanced technology, Webb smiled sadly. Technology isn't what matters in this fight. The Devourers can simply decide that advanced technology doesn't exist and it stops working. What matters is adaptability, creativity, and the ability to accept impossible truths without losing sanity. He gestured toward the display, which now showed images of various Confederation species. The Zephyrians are masters of energy, but they think in terms of electromagnetic principles that the Devourers can simply ignore. The Korthax work with biological systems that can be unmade with a thought. Even the Veil, for all their quantum mastery, are still bound by the laws of physics. And humans? Chilin asked. Humans are chaotic, Webb replied, and there was pride in his voice. You adapt, improvise, and find solutions that shouldn't work but do anyway. You can accept contradictions and paradoxes without breaking down. Most importantly, you can hold on to your humanity even when everything around you becomes impossible. The conference room door burst open as one of Morrison's aides rushed in. Madam President, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Something's happening. Webb nodded grimly. The first scouts have arrived. The display screen changed once more, showing the space around Earth. At first, Chun couldn't see anything unusual. Then the stars began to flicker and dim, as if something was passing between them and the solar system. What are we looking at? Morrison asked. Devourer scouts, Webb replied. They exist partially outside normal space-time, which makes them difficult to detect with conventional sensors. But they're here, testing our reality's defenses. As they watched, sections of space began to distort. The familiar patterns of stars and planets twisted into impossible shapes that made Chun's eyes water. Reality itself was being probed and tested by beings that existed in the spaces between existence. The Confederation fleets approaching our system won't be able to fight these things, Webb continued. Their weapons are designed to work within the normal laws of physics. The scouts can simply decide that those laws don't apply. President Morrison gripped the edge of the conference table. What do? We show the galaxy what humanity has become, Webb replied. And we hope they're wise enough to accept our help instead of destroying us out of fear. The display showed the approaching Confederation fleets, 3 massive formations of warships carrying enough firepower to crack planets. Behind them, moving like shadows through dimensions that normal sensors couldn't detect, came the Devourer scouts. The fleets will be here in 6 hours, Webb said. The scouts will test them first to see how this dimension's inhabitants respond to their presence. Based on what they learn, they'll either call for more scouts or begin the process of full invasion. Chun understood the implications immediately. The Confederation fleets are going to be used as test subjects. Exactly, Webb nodded. And when conventional weapons prove useless against the scouts, panic will spread throughout the galaxy. Civilizations will fall into chaos, making them easier prey for the main invasion force. Morrison stood up, her face set with determination. Captain Webb, what do you need from Earth? Permission to engage the scouts when they arrive, Webb replied. And support when the Confederation demands answers for what they're about to witness. You have both, Morrison said without hesitation. Webb bowed his head respectfully. Thank you, Madam President. But I should warn you, what you're about to see will change how the galaxy views humanity forever. We're no longer just another young species struggling to find our place among the stars. He began to fade from view, becoming translucent as he prepared to return to his ship. We're about to become something that the oldest civilizations in. The galaxy will either worship or fear, and I'm not sure which would be worse for our future. As Webb disappeared completely, the display screen showed the Prometheus beginning to move from its position in Earth orbit. The ship's hull was glowing, brighter now, and the geometric patterns covering its surface were shifting faster, as if the vessel was preparing for battle. Chun watched the ship that had once been humanity's pride transform itself into something beyond recognition. Whatever happened in the next few hours would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of every thinking being in the galaxy. The scouts were coming, and humanity's lost children were the only things standing between reality and complete annihilation. The first Confederation fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system, just as the Devourer scouts began their assault on reality itself. Admiral Chun watched from the Earth Defense Station as space around the alien warships started to behave in ways that violated every law of physics she knew. Stars flickered and went out, not because they were destroyed, but because the scouts were deciding that they had never existed in the first place. Planets shifted position without moving, appearing in multiple locations simultaneously. The very concept of distance became meaningless as ships found themselves millions of kilometers from where they had been moments before. Admiral, Commander Jackson called out, his voice tight with panic. The Confederation fleet is reporting complete system failures. But it's not like what happened before with the Prometheus. Their ships are just stopping. Chun understood what he meant as she watched the display screens. The advanced alien warships weren't being disabled by electromagnetic interference. They were simply ceasing to function because the scouts were rewriting the local laws of physics to make advanced technology impossible. Where's the Prometheus? She asked. Moving to intercept, Jackson replied. But Admiral, our sensors can barely track it anymore. The ship keeps phasing in and out of normal space. Through the observation windows, Chen could see flashes of light in the distance as the ESV Prometheus engaged enemies that existed only partially in their dimension. The battle that was taking place defied every principle of warfare she had ever learned. Captain, Webb's voice came through the communication system, but it sounded strange, as if he was speaking from very far away. Admiral Chun, we're engaging. 3 scout entities. Be advised that reality in this region may become unstable during the fight. Unstable how? Chun asked, but she got her answer almost immediately. The stars outside the station windows began to move in patterns that hurt to watch. Up and down lost all meaning as gravity shifted direction randomly. The metal walls of the station groaned. Under stresses that shouldn't exist, while computer systems throughout the facility started displaying impossible data on the main screen, Chun could see the Confederation ships struggling to understand what was happening to them. The proud vessels of the galaxy's greatest civilizations were helpless against an enemy that could simply decide their weapons didn't work and their engines couldn't function. Then the Prometheus struck back. What happened next was impossible to describe in normal terms. The human ships seemed to multiply, existing in dozens of locations simultaneously while firing weapons that weren't made of matter or energy but of pure concept. Reality twisted around the battlefield as the transformed crew fought beings that existed in the spaces between thoughts. Chun watched as one of the Devourer scouts simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but convinced that it had never been real in the first place. Another scout tried to erase the Prometheus from existence, but the ship refused to be unmade, its crews were holding their reality together through sheer determination. How are they doing that? Dr. Foster asked, joining Chun at the observation. Windows. The scientist had been monitoring the battle from the research station. They're fighting impossibility with impossibility, Chun replied, beginning to understand what Webb had meant. The scouts can rewrite reality, but so can the Prometheus crew. It's not about technology anymore. It's about who has the stronger will to decide what's real. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but might have been minutes or days. Time itself had become unreliable in the space around the fighting. Chun could see members of the Prometheus crew materializing in open space without protective suits, their transformed bodies able to exist in environments that should have killed them instantly. One figure she recognized as Dr. Martinez, the xenorchaeologist, who had been studying the dimensional anomaly when the ship first disappeared, but Martinez was no longer entirely human. She existed as a pattern of living mathematics, using equations as weapons against scouts that tried to erase her from existence. Another crew member, Chief Engineer Thompson, had become something that looked like a mobile constellation of stars. He reached into the hull of a disabled Confederation ship and began repairing it. By convincing its atoms to remember what they were supposed to be, the children of the Prometheus crew were the most changed of all. They moved through space like living thoughts, adapting to each new impossibility the scouts created without fear or hesitation. Chun watched a 10-year-old girl phase through solid matter to reach a scout entity and destroy it, by imagining it out of existence. They're not human anymore, Dr. Foster whispered, but Chun could hear awe rather than horror in her voice. No, Chun agreed. There's something more. Something that can protect humanity from things that shouldn't exist. The tide of battle turned when Captain Webb himself entered the fight directly. He appeared in space near the largest scout entity, and Ching could see that he had become something that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When he spoke, his voice carried across space without any communication system. "You are not welcome in this reality," Webb said, and his words had the force of absolute law. "You will leave now or face the consequences." The scout entity tried to erase Webb from existence, but he simply refused to be unmade. Instead, he reached out with hands that existed in several dimensions at once and began to dismantle the scout piece by piece, convincing each part that it belonged somewhere else. Within minutes, the remaining scouts fled back into the void between dimensions, carrying news of what they had encountered to their masters. The immediate threat was over, but Chin knew this was only the beginning. The Confederation fleets hung in space, their crews stunned by what they had witnessed. Weapons that could destroy planets had proven useless against enemies that barely seemed to notice they existed. But humans, transformed beyond recognition, had fought those same enemies, and one, Admiral Vexhi's voice came through the communication system, the energy being's patterns flickering with what Chun now recognized as fear. Human vessel Prometheus, respond immediately. This is Captain Webb, came the reply. Webb's voice sounded more human now that the battle was over, but there was still something in it that spoke of vast distances and impossible knowledge. What? Are you? Vexhi asked bluntly. Webb was silent for a long moment before answering. We are what humanity becomes when it chooses to survive impossible odds. We are the price that was paid to give this galaxy a chance against the Devourers. And the entities you fought? Scouts, Webb replied. They came to test our reality's defenses. They found them lacking except for us. Now they will return to. They're masters with news that this dimension has guardians. Chun could imagine the chaos that was spreading through Confederation command centers across the galaxy. Everything they thought they knew about power, about technology, about the nature of reality itself, had just been proven wrong. Captain Webb, she called out, what happens now? Now we prepare, Webb replied. The scouts will report that our reality is defended, but not how well. The Devourers will send a larger force to test us again. Each time the attacks will get stronger until they either decide we're too dangerous to bother with or they commit to a full invasion. President Morrison's voice joined the conversation from Earth's surface. Captain, what do you need from us? More Guardians, Webb said simply. We can't protect an entire galaxy with just the crew of one ship. We need volunteers willing to undergo the same transformation we did. Chun felt her breath catch. The transformation. That had saved the Prometheus crew had also cost them their humanity in many ways. They were still human in their hearts and minds, but their bodies and abilities were beyond normal understanding. The transformation process is dangerous, Webb continued. Not everyone survives it, and those who do are changed forever. But without more Guardians, this galaxy will fall when the main Devourer force arrives. Admiral Vexhi's energy patterns pulsed rapidly. You're asking us to trust you with the lives of our people. I'm asking you to choose, Webb replied. Trust us, or watch everything you've ever cared about be consumed by beings that exist to destroy reality itself. The communication channels fell silent as the implications sank in. The mighty Galactic Confederation, with all its advanced civilizations and powerful technologies, was helpless against the cosmic threat facing them. Their only hope lay with humans who had been transformed into something beyond normal existence. Chun looked out at the Prometheus, floating serenely in space as if the reality-bending battle had never happened. The ship's hull still pulsed with inner light, and the geometric patterns covering its surface continued to shift and flow. Admiral Chun, Webb's voice came through privately on her personal communicator. There's something else you need to know. What is it, Marcus? The transformation isn't just about gaining the power to fight the Devourers, Webb said quietly. It's about becoming capable of holding reality together when everything else fails. The children adapt fastest because they haven't learned to believe that things are impossible. Chun understood. You're not just creating warriors. You're creating living anchors for existence itself. Exactly, Webb replied. When the main invasion comes, the Devourers will try to unmake this entire dimensional layer. They'll attack the very concept of existence here. We'll need guardians spread throughout the galaxy, each one serving as a fixed point that refuses to let reality be erased. The weight of what Webb was describing hit Chun like a physical blow. They weren't just talking about a military defense. They were talking about fundamentally changing what it meant to be alive in this universe. How many volunteers will you need? She asked. Thousands? Webb replied. Maybe tens of thousands. And they'll need to be distributed across every major star system, every important world. The Devourers will attack everywhere at once when they finally come in force. Chun looked at the disabled Confederation ships, their crews struggling to restart systems that had been convinced not to work. Then she looked at Earth, beautiful and blue against the black of space, completely unaware of how close it had come to simply ceasing to exist. Marcus, she said finally, you have your first volunteer. Webb's silence stretched for a long moment. Sarah, you don't understand what you're offering. The transformation changes everything. You'll still be you, but you'll also be something that can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. You'll see reality from perspectives that will make normal human life seem like a half-remembered dream. Will I still care about protecting Earth? She asked. More than you do now, Webb assured her. But you'll also care about protecting realities you've never seen, dimensions that exist parallel to our own. Your perspective will expand beyond anything you can imagine, Chun nodded. Then I accept. Over the following hours, similar conversations took place throughout the galaxy. The Confederation's finest officers and scientists, faced with the choice between transformation and extinction, began volunteering for a process that would make them into something beyond their current species. The Zephyrians, masters of energy, sent their most gifted manipulators. The Korthax contributed their greatest bioengineers. Even the ancient Veil emerged from their quantum realms to offer candidates for transformation, but it was humans who volunteered in the greatest numbers, perhaps because they had already seen what their own people could become, or perhaps because they had always been the species most willing to adapt to impossible circumstances. The ESV Prometheus became the center of a new kind of fleet. One made up of volunteers from every corner of the galaxy who were willing to sacrifice their normal existence to become guardians of reality itself. The ship's transformation chambers, grown from technology that existed in multiple dimensions, began the slow process of creating a new generation of beings. Capable of fighting impossibility with will alone, Captain Webb stood on the bridge of his transformed ship, looking out at the stars that now seemed small and fragile compared to the vast threats lurking in the void between realities. The immediate battle was won, but the war for existence itself was just beginning. Behind him, Admiral Chen emerged from her transformation chamber, no longer entirely human but still recognizably herself. She could see across dimensions now, perceive threats that normal senses couldn't detect, and hold on to reality through sheer force of will. "Welcome to the Guardians," Webb said, his voice carrying warmth despite the vast distances it seemed to cross. "Are you ready to defend everything that exists?" Chen looked out at the galaxy spread before them, knowing that somewhere in the void between realities, ancient enemies were preparing for war. But she also knew that humanity had found its purpose among the stars, not as conquerors or explorers, but as the species willing to become something impossible to protect the possible. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it completely.